Hello and welcome to WriterSpeak, a program dedicated to the written word and those who produce it. I'm your host, Mikala Kennan, and with me today is fabulous, fabulous lady, Sandy Baker. She is a master of all trades, and I literally have to read her little bio here. A writer, a reader, a master gardener, a crafter, a baker. I'm going to throw in candlestick maker as well because that's probably been part of it somewhere along the line. Her alter ego is Mrs. Feeney, and she's converted many a grubby kid into a lover of the garden and all the treasures found therein. Her latest venture is a radical departure from gardening and using her gloves into the realm of political thrillers as a collaborative writer with Tom Reed. And we'll talk more about that as we get into the program. But for right now, welcome, Sandy.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
But I hardly know where to begin. So I'm going to say, let's begin with Zach and his zucchinis. And how did this whole series come about?
Okay. I've always loved to garden, although I mostly haven't known what I was doing until I became a master gardener. So take the gardening part. And then I just took experiences from my life, little vignettes, little remembrances, and together with my love of reading and writing, I decided I'm going to write kids' books. And the joke as far as zucchini goes is when zucchini starts being harvested, lock your car doors. Because you don't want your neighbor to fill your car with zucchini. It's very prolific. So that's kind of the fun part of Zach's zany zucchini land. It's kind of like Jack and the Beanstalk maybe, no magic beans, but he grows zucchini, pumpkins, gourds, and watermelon. And you can imagine what happens.
Yes.
So it was really kind of fun to create Zach and come up with that story. The kids like it. They like it because of the alliteration. And I asked them, what do you hear when I say the title Zach, Zany Zucchini Land? And they got it. They know right away.
They do.
Yeah.
And then tell us about Mrs. Feeney.
Okay, good old Mrs. Feeney. Every person I've ever spoken to, and you can probably think of this too, every kid growing up had some kind of meany, ogre-y person in their neighborhood. And the kids were kind of mean to them, and maybe they were scared of that person, but they would tease that person unmercifully. Well, Mrs. Feeney, the kids in her neighborhood, they think she's a meanie. She also lives on a corner, and the kids cut across her lawn and basically destroy her lawn. Well, my first house was on a corner, and lo and behold, the kids cut across our lawn, and we did everything to keep them from doing that. We turned on the sprinklers, we would run out there, we would ask them nicely, please don't cut across the lawn. So take that scenario together with the fact that I lecture for master gardeners on taking out your front lawn and planting something else in it, like vegetables and flowers. That was kind of my whole concept for Mrs. Feeney and the Grubby Garden Gang.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was fun. It all came together, and it just was really fun to pull together like that.
Sure. And are these continuing adventures, or?
I have about 8 books, and people always call it a series, my kid gardening book series. And I wondered about that, and I asked a publisher, would I call this a series? And she said no, that the industry is calling what I do a circle, because I have different characters in each book. I don't have a continuing plot. And because of that, I'm selecting a different illustrator for each one. So even though the books, they're all hardback, they're all 32-page picture books, but different characters, different illustrators, and different plots. So I guess I'm doing a circle instead of a series.
Oh, I think that's an interesting distinction.
It is.
Actually.
It is.
And it makes sense to use different illustrators and a little different slant.
Yeah,
on each
yeah.
book.
I wanted them to each look different just because of the different slant and the different characters in each of the books. Yeah.
So I had read at one point where someone said if you're going to write children's books, you need to be in touch with the child inside yourself. Would you say that's true?
I think it is true, and I've often wondered how I landed into this 5 to 9-year-old age range when I was writing, and maybe I had great memories back then, or maybe I loved that particular time in my life, but when I decided to write children's gardening books, they all turned out to be in the same age range, with a vocabulary that was, you know, not for 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds, a little bit advanced with a couple of very advanced words thrown in. And what I try to do is put myself back in that time and think of what I was doing, what I was growing or building or destroying, or how naughty I might have been at that time, and just kind of go back in time and feel that, and then try and get that same feeling in the book. Also, when I visit schools and see kids, and as my own children and grandson were growing up, I listen to their language, because you have to be able to speak in the language of the children to whom your book is meant for. So that's been fun too. And the language over the years differs.
Yes.
It gets dated. I can't write in the language that my grandson or son spoke in. You know, the slang words are different, just the whole usage. My son was not saying, "Oh, cool," when he was 6 years old, but the kids now are saying, "Oh, way cool," you know, when they're doing high fives. And so I have to try and incorporate the newer, more upbeat
Probably
kind of
have to throw a
language.
dude in there
A
as well.
dude, yeah,
A dude.
I do. Got dudes and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a very valid point, because I saw, who was it? Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, and they were using cell phones. And the Minnie Mouse and Mickey Mouse of today have cell phones.
Yeah.
They didn't 20 years ago.
Well, I have Zach. His father suggests that he text his friends.
Ah,
So
Very
I mean,
relevant.
You have to be with
Yeah,
it as
absolutely.
an author. You have to incorporate these, you know, the current little things and practices into the books to
Because
make them
that's-
so they appeal to
Sure.
to your readers.
sure. So what else then goes into making a good children's book?
Oh, I think the illustrations are so important. I consider the illustrator as a partner, basically. It's a collaboration. And I didn't know initially what kind of illustration I wanted for Mrs. Feeney and the Grubby Garden Gang. That was my first book. And I happened to see the illustrations of Jim DeWitt. And I thought, that's it. The way he paints, even though it's impressionistic, the kids will get that. They'll, his theory is don't be afraid of color. So he takes his paintbrushes and just puts the color on. And that's the way kids love to paint.
Sure.
And they love to see the color in his book. So I thought, okay, I'm going to hire this guy and ask him to do my book. And he was delighted. It was only his second picture book, but we were kind of like 50-50. I gave him my manuscript, and I did not micromanage him. I divided my text into sections, page by page, what text I thought would go on each page. And then he, in his mind, developed a concept for what he thought should go on those pages to illustrate my words. And then we got together when we were getting down to the wire once a week or once every 2 weeks, just to kind of talk about it, to make sure we were both comfortable with the words and the text and the illustrations. And it just, you know, it really worked out. I was thrilled with what he came up with.
Now, and because Amanda Baker has differently illustrated Zach's book, was it the same process?
Yeah, Amanda Baker, everyone asked me, first of all, is she related to me? She isn't related to me at all. I decided with Zach, because he's a character. He's a charming young lad with a lot of ingenuity, with a little bit different attitude. And so I thought I wanted to go more cartoony this time. And so I looked at the illustrations of maybe 4 or 5 different illustrators, their styles, things that they'd already produced. And I got together with Amanda and I gave her my manuscript and I said, just tell me what you see. How do you visualize Zach? And he has red hair and he has this kind of little cute but devilish look in his eyes, and lots of energy in his body language. And I thought, okay, this is going to work. This is really good. She really captured him. And again, I didn't micromanage him. That's the way I like to work. I like to let the artist, who is a creative person in his or her own right, visualize the characters, the setting, the concept, and then, you know, come back to me with, well, what do you think of this? And just, you know, it really worked out great. I just couldn't have been happier. I was so thrilled when I saw her first drawings for Zach. It was just, that's it. We're going to go with her, Zach.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Well, and then a persona is created. And so anytime we think of Zach, we're going to think of him as being that devilish little, maybe almost a Dennis the Menace kind of guy.
Maybe that's what she had in mind. I don't really know, but the whole concept for this book was his boredom. He lived way out in the country and he was bored. He couldn't think of anything to do, and none of his friends would come out there because it was so far. And that's when he decided to grow the garden. And he was very clever about how he did it.
Many kinds of things that grow on vines.
Vines, lots of vines that took over the entire yard, yes.
Right,
yes.
Right. Well, we had talked earlier about growing up in the country, because that was my experience as well, and the freedom that gives one's imagination. But it makes me wonder then, where does your concepts for stories come from? You know, when you're in the garden and you're turning over piles of compost, or maybe you're gathering baskets of zucchinis, you know, are you also thinking of your next story, or are you, little things inspire you?
I am. When I'm in the garden, a lot of the things that you do in the garden are just kind of really routine, boring things like weeding or turning over the soil. So my hands may be doing that, but my mind is doing something else.
Yes.
And that's when I become very, very creative. Like when I'm driving a car, I think I have lots of good ideas. And when I'm gardening, I have lots of good ideas too. Like when I'm digging in the soil and the worms, I in my compost pile, just tons of worms, and I think, who would like these worms? And how are the little girls going to react to these worms? And are the boys going to pick them up and say, ooh, ooh? You know, just all these little ideas come.
Sure.
And the butterflies. I have one of my other books coming up is Mystery of the Dead Butterflies. I garden for habitat. I like to encourage birds and bees and butterflies and hummers and bugs that come into my garden. So that's what this book is going to be about, the mystery of the dead butterflies. When I'm in my garden and see the butterflies, I think, what would a little child do? How would she react if she saw butterflies? How would she react if she saw dead butterflies? Because I did come across one once just lying there. I thought it was warming itself in the sun, which is what they do to get their wing muscles going, and it wasn't. It was dead, and it just crushed me. And I just thought of a little child finding that, you know, and so the story just kind of evolved. Who did that? Why is that butterfly dead?
Absolutely.
Was Dad using chemicals in the garden? So
good point.
That's how that story came about.
Good point.
And it just, you know, it just happens. Little things trigger the imagination.
And they are daily things.
They are. And I would encourage writers to not just forget or pass off those daily little things, because those are going to be the seeds for some story, I think, somewhere down the line. That's where they come from. They all come from things that we've done or observed or felt or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I would dare say that you're very in touch with your 7, 8, 9-year-old child that is probably your little muse that gives you the ideas for these stories.
I think.
I think so.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think. I try, when I'm doing readings in school, sometimes I ask the kids to close their eyes and just imagine like what Zach is going to be. And I don't ever tell the kids how old Zach is. It's never mentioned in the book because I want the children to think, Zach is my age. I could do this. And close their eyes and imagine Zach standing in front of them. And then I try and go into maybe using the voice of a little kid who's saying, boring, what am I going to do? Nobody comes and visits me. I hate this kind of thing. And, you know, then suddenly they're with it. They've, you know, I think, I've got them. Yeah, it's fun. It really is.
I think also with our diets changing today and our awareness of farm to table kinds of eating and the richness that we have agriculturally here in Sonoma County, these are great tools to not only teach the kids but encourage the kids to find out where their food is from and ask questions like, what happened to the butterfly, or what about this pile of worms?
Right, right. We are so lucky here in Sonoma County. I mean, we have it all. There are kids in the city who think their vegetables come from the grocery store, the supermarket. They don't have the connection.
Yeah.
But even some kids here too, maybe. But I think parents and the schools really do a good job of trying to expose their children to the beauty and the function of nature and growing things and using those things, you know, growing food for our own tables. My next book that I'm publishing, I'm probably going to publish it myself, is called The Salady Soup Garden. It's about 23 third graders who, when their teacher says, we're going to have a garden and grow vegetables, they say, no way, yuck, I'm not going to grow vegetables. Because they say, who's going to eat all that stuff? And he says, well, you are. Not me. No. So, but they grow it. They see it. They see it coming up out of the soil. They see the worms. They play with the compost. They smell it. They have the whole experience. And do they love the salad and the vegetables and the soup? They do. Yes. Because it was theirs. And, you know, they just enjoyed that whole experience. And, oh, how great it is for the kids to do that. Yeah. And if they get dirty, who cares? Parents who don't want their kids to get dirty, come on, parents, let your kids get dirty. It's good for them. Absolutely. We're all going to eat some dirt sometimes in our life. Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
Have you always been interested in gardening, or kind of evolved into that?
Yeah, I was always interested in gardening. My grandfather gardened. He had a victory garden, which maybe dates me, but he had a victory garden because I had three uncles who were in World War II. And everybody had victory gardens back then, and I was his little helper. And my mother always had a garden too, you know, tomatoes and herbs and vegetables and peach trees. And I was a helper, but an observer too, I think. Yeah. But I think really until I joined Master Gardeners, I didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of gardened by the seat of my pants. And probably killed a lot of things. I mean, it's a good experience. You learn how to kill fewer things the more you do it. So now I kill a lot fewer things than I used to. You know, my thumbs are greener than they used to be. But I love it. I'm a very hands-on kind of person. So what could be better than gardening? You know, it's fabulous.
So talk a little bit about writing to your audience.
I think when you start writing, you have to know the audience you're writing for. I knew I was writing for teens. I knew I was writing for children. I wasn't quite sure what age group the book fit into. So I think you have to be in touch with that kind of audience and try to not necessarily speak in that voice, but speak to them so that they understand.
To their relevancy and experience.
Right, exactly. And that really played a big part in how I approached the novel that I co-wrote with Tom Reed. People people have asked me, what in the world are you doing, Sandy?
And that's a perfect segue.
This is not a children's gardening book. And I said, no, this is more for, when I say adults, people think, oh my gosh, it's X-rated or R-rated. No, no, it's just for older readers. It's not for the 5 to 9-year-olds. This is a thriller, a political thriller, a nuclear countdown. It's got a lot of historical facts and technology in it. And that was not my part of the contribution to the book. I had to completely go out of the kid gardening mindset and put myself just in another world of a young female CIA agent. We have another protagonist, female protagonist in this book. And this protagonist really appeals to both men and women. This is not chick lit. This is heavy duty, you know, thriller kind of thing. And it was interesting because my contribution was the plot and the character and the color development, because Tom is the engineer, the technologist, the scientist, the historian, and I had to get on the other side. He was the yin, or you know, we were yin and yang, or left brain, right brain kind of thing. So I was what he wasn't, but we really complemented each other. So I said, okay, Tom, we have to have a protagonist who's really going to be just very appealing to both men and women. That protagonist but the protagonist can't be perfect. There's got to be something wrong. We made it be a she because he knew somebody who had some of the background that we thought would be interesting for this book. So your protagonist can't be perfect. Protagonist has to have an issue, has to have something that he or she must overcome. So I said, in the first chapter, we got to either kill somebody off or blow something up, okay? Because he didn't have either of that in the first chapter. So we did that. And we decided on this female CIA protagonist, and she's really fun. She's very sharp. She has lots of boyfriends. She can't really kind of settle down into one, and her mother is saying, what is the matter with you? You're never going to get married if you're like that. She's very competitive. You know, she's CIA, for heaven's sake. She speaks 3 languages. She can carry a Stinger missile on her shoulder, you know?
Wow, what a
so
woman.
her mother, you know, is very concerned about that. Well, too bad, Mom, this is what I do. And she, you know, she has boyfriends. It's not that kind of a thing. But and then we had to do the whole evil guy. We had to have an evil, bad character. And they had to react together. And you always hope that the good guy or gal will win. But before you get from there to there, you've got to have a lot of good things happening in between.
And that was your role then, to help kind of flesh out and add some color play.
Right,
if
exactly.
You will. And that's called the Tehran Triangle.
The Tehran Triangle, yes.
Triangle.
The triangle being Tehran, El Paso, and Juarez.
And give us just briefly Tom's expertise in the context of that.
Okay, Tom has fabulous expertise. He was a nuclear scientist at Livermore Labs. He worked with Edward Teller. And he also was on the political side. He ran political campaigns in California and nationally. He was also he's a former Secretary of the Air Force under the Ford and Carter presidencies. So he had all the history and the science and the technology, and so he is very knowledgeable there.
And then just briefly, because we're kind of winding down the half hour, how was it as a collaborative experience for you to work with Tom, or just anybody, when you're used to writing your own material and then suddenly you're in partnership?
Yeah, that's a good question, because writing usually is a solo kind of thing. You do it alone because it's from your experience, and it worked out really well, I think, just because if I were a nuclear scientist and he is, 2 doing the same thing, maybe it would have been adversarial. Well, that's not the way it's done. No, it's better done this way because I did the research on this, or blah, blah, blah. No, we just filled in where each of us, were better. And it just kind of flowed. We still meet now once a week, every Tuesday morning, and we meet and we talk about the plot, the book, the color, the description, how it should flow, what chapters, the structure of it, the foreword, what we're going to put in the appendix. And we just, although we didn't see eye to eye on everything, it worked out that way. We came up, I think, with a really good product, and I think the book we're working on too, just because of the way we work, and we really respect each other. We respect each other's opinions and expertise and comments back and forth, and just, we're really able to have a good relationship.
Good.
Yeah. And
just briefly, how can we get copies of all of it?
Oh, good question. Thank you. Okay, both Tom and I have websites, tomreedauthor.com, sandybakerwriter.com. Okay. All of my books are on my website. His website doesn't carry my book, but that's okay.
All right.
My website carries our book. All of our books are available on Amazon.
Okay.
So excellent. You can get it in a lot of different places.
Good. And
Mrs. Feeney and the Tehran Triangle are ebooks as well.
Good.
So you can get it directly from us, or you can get it from Amazon. You can get it from bookstores. And all these books are at a lot of locations all around Sonoma County.
Okay.
Right.
Good.
They are.
And we'll run the information on that again at the credits. But Sandy, I just want to say it's been a delightful conversation.
Thank you.
And I wish we could go on for another 20 minutes.
Oh, I do too. We could.
We certainly could.
We could, yes.
Once again, thank you for tuning in to WriterSpeak. I'm talking to Sandy Baker. We've been talking about Mrs. Feeney and Zach and the Tehran Triangle. Thank you. We appreciate your tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.